Hello and welcome to the first Hope Show. French police and officials were here to clear 100 meters along the perimeter of jungle from the route D Grave Line within 3 days. We are here to get an update from a volunteer who have been in Calais for several months.
Oh, hello. My name's Tom Radcliffe. My partner Shizuka and I started an organisation called Kent for Calais, which then became Help Calais, which now is Help Refugees, and we work with Auberge des Migrants, who run the warehouse and build the shelters in the jungle, and also do an awful lot of distribution in the jungle.
Can you tell us something about today? What's happening today at the jungle?
This morning, a lot of the community leaders went to meet the police and the prefect and various government officials. We prepared a list of questions for that meeting. It seems that at the meeting pretty much those questions were ignored. They were simply told that large numbers of people in the Ethiopian and Eritrean community, large numbers of people in the Afghan community, and the Kurdish women's and children's sort of family field will have to be moved. At first we were told they would have to be moved in 3 days, and that's somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 people. Later on today, we were given a slightly more open-ended, ambiguous answer, which was that if they see some movement, Wednesday, Tuesday, this being Monday, they might extend that deadline, but the logistics involved in doing it are absolutely immense. I mean, even if they told us we had a month to do it, that would have been difficult. And we've just adjourned from a meeting with the community leaders where it wasn't quite possible to come to a united decision about what to do about this problem, but we will be reconvening again at 7 o'clock and waiting to hear back from community leaders who will be going and talking to their communities between now and then. And then, of course, we will support them in whatever they do.
What's your personal view on what French government is doing?
My personal view on what the French government is doing just in this one tiny incident, I find it incredibly aggressive. I find it to be completely without compassion. I think it is quite shameful beyond belief that the European community, French or otherwise, is treating refugees who are fleeing from wars which we have a huge responsibility for the existence of in this fashion. We should be welcoming people. We should be at the very least providing decent living conditions for people while it is worked out how they're going to continue with their lives. To be taking this kind of action in the middle of winter where people are extraordinarily vulnerable, I think is barbaric, and it makes me feel intensely ashamed. When all you have is a tent or a sort of wooden shelter and everything you own, which is just a few things, is in there, and it's the middle of winter and you're surrounded by mud and it's raining heavily, and you've got to take that apart, move it, set it up, go back in, and there's absolutely no guarantee that you won't have to do it again and again, on top of the sort of total uncertainty about what's going to happen to you in the long run. You know, nobody here has any certainty about what will happen. Even if people claim asylum in France, there's absolutely no guarantee that they will be accepted. Huge number of people are not accepted. And then what do? A lot of people's are not able to return to their home country, but it's not recognised that the problems they're running away from qualify them to be called a refugee. And this is the kind of incredible insecurity that people live with on a daily basis, above and beyond everything, whether they're going to eat. Clothes get soaked, they can't dry them, they can't wash them. It's just an endless grind day to day, and then suddenly to have to pack up everything and move again it's incredibly brutal. I've been here a long time, and I've made a lot of extraordinary friends here who I deeply love and respect, and the suffering that this is causing already is it's bad enough without this sort of thing happening. To give people 3 days when they've watched us building in these areas for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. They've watched us do this. They must have known what was coming. They've chosen not to say anything to us at all, and now we're going to tear down all these homes that people have made. We were desperately trying to get people housed for the winter here, for when the freeze comes, for when people will be incredibly vulnerable, and the possibility of people, becoming so cold and so frozen and so ill that they die. And we were very close to, in the last sort of month, being able to get everyone inside a shelter. And now this is going to completely ruin that, as we're going to have to move, well over 1,000 people. And the people who were waiting to be housed are not even going to get housed now, because we're going to have to move all these people. Or there is the threat that force may be used to move them. I mean, really, words do actually fail me. But beyond that, I mean, just the way that the West is refusing to take responsibility for this is what brought most of the volunteers here in the first place. This is just one tiny symptom of the way that many countries in Europe are refusing to help people. We're so wealthy, we have so much, and we're refusing to share it, and it is shameful. It's very difficult for us who have not been through what refugees have been through to understand what it's like to be in a place where you don't even have the right to stand on the ground you're standing on, where you can be moved at any moment, where you can be beaten and no one will do anything about it, where you could even possibly be killed and no one would do anything about it, where in fact the agents of the law might be the people doing that to you, and that is not too strong a statement. We know that this happens. My message to the British government is very simply this: there are so many people here who have connections in Britain, who have family in Britain, friends in Britain. There are so many people here who have worked with British people in their home countries, who've served with the British Army and the American Army. There's so many people here who have fought for years against ISIS and Daesh and all this kind of thing. They're all fleeing here. It's quite extraordinary that they're being treated as if they were enemies. The British government are pleading poverty. They are having a austerity campaign in Britain itself. But the truth about Britain is that Britain is quite astronomically wealthy, has a huge amount of room, and has a huge debt to pay to the rest of the world. For hundreds of years, the British went round the world. They took what they wanted. They committed genocide in other people's countries. They have manipulated and interfered. We will not open the borders. We will not offer them the hand of friendship. And I, as a British person, am deeply, deeply ashamed of that. And I think it's time that we recognise the debt that we owe to the rest of the world, and that we open our borders, and that we look seriously at people's asylum claims who are here in the jungle. There are so many people who would be a massive asset to our country and our community, and that we recognise that this is one world now. We all have to live together. If there's going to be peace, if we have to stop thinking along old, selfish, aggressive nationalist lines, and we have to accept that there's going to be a huge movement of people in the world, and it's not going to stop, and we have to deal with it decently, kindly, intelligently, and we have to make friends here. People here are willing to be our friends, they're willing to work with us, but we're turning friends into enemies, and it's madness. So I say, look at people's asylum claims here, open the border on this side, allow people to claim asylum from France. That's all people are asking for, so that people don't have to risk their lives crossing the English Channel. You know, if the UN were allowed to come in here, they would be allowed to apply for asylum in Britain for people. I know the French government won't do that, but it's the right thing to do. And honestly, everybody knows that deep down.
Thank you. One last question. Can you tell us something about your Calais experience, as you've been here about a few months? Can you tell about the refugees? Can you tell about the life in there? A bit about that?
On a personal note, this experience has completely changed me. I'm never going to be the same again. I don't think I can go back to the life I lived before. I've met some of the most extraordinary people that I've ever met in my life. People who I admire greatly and whose strength and courage under these conditions makes me feel incredibly humble. I've seen a kind of vision of community here which I've seen falling apart in my own country, where people have become extremely selfish and individualistic, and they don't think in terms of community anymore. Whereas, in a sense, people here still come from countries where that exists, where that is something that's very important. And it's something that I've begun to learn from and that I admire very greatly, and that I, in spite of the hardships and the difficulties here, to be honest with you, I enjoy being here. I know that sounds crazy, but I do. I enjoy the brotherhood that I find here. I think the jungle has a great deal to teach the European communities, who I think are becoming incredibly inward-looking and aggressive and defensive.